Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through a perpetually lefty pinko commie soy boy cuck Antifa super soldier filter. But more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig. I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. My tastes range, but mostly exists on opposite ends of the highbrow, lowbrow spectrum. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. I use she, they pronouns. I work in higher ed and run a food pantry. I care about food access, reproductive justice, building a robust social welfare state, and ending the state's domination through the criminal legal system. I'm a staunch defender of... nothing in this movie. So, Craig.
Yeah?
What other pop culture are you getting into these days?
I have one that I want to talk about that might engender some angry people because people love it. I don't know, actually. I don't know if people love this new season, but the people that love the show really defend it. But I was really let down by this new season of Black Mirror.
Yeah, I have watched 1.5 episodes.
1.5 episodes. What is it that is not the thing
I watched Joan. The Joan episode, the first one.
1.5 of this season?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant in toto.
No. I've watched. Yeah. I will say I am I'm not a completionist with anything. I am not someone who's like, I started it, I have to finish it. Fuck that shit. If I don't like it, throw it away. And so I have not seen every single episode of it because there are ones I would read the description or see someone talk about it on Twitter or something in a previous iteration and go, I think I'm all right. But I have seen most prior episodes.
Okay.
Specifically 1.5 of this.
And what did you think of Joan?
I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
I felt like it was all gas, no brake.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel rewarding in that.
All. And I just hate how much up their own ass the show is now. And they were a show on a fake channel that was just looked just like the Netflix logo and all that. And I don't know, Black Mirror just seems, that episode just had so much of we're prescient. We're prescient, and you come on.
We're gonna do this to you.
Yeah, and I was so goddamn. Yeah, that was the other thing about it. I was like, okay, you're the kind of the bad guy in this episode, but whatever. Okay, what's the half episode you watched?
The Disco Demon.
That was a bummer.
Jason, I know you listen to this. I skipped to it because usually I would just watch them sequentially unless I was intentionally skipping one. But I skipped to it because Jason asked me if I had seen it, and I stopped watching it. I don't even know that I made it halfway through, just because it wasn't pulling me in.
So I think the issue that I have with this season is that they've kind of lost the plot on what made Black Mirror interesting to me, at least, which was kind of they are kissing their own ass a little bit, but they have been there have been some episodes that are pretty prescient or whatever. And this season they forego a lot of the dystopian futurism sci-fi for just straight up horror, and they just don't do horror very well.
I think that's a very astute criticism, is that the really pulling on sci-fi tropes seems to have largely disappeared.
Gone. Yeah, and then
and they're not building suspense terribly well, which is a major undercurrent of successful horror.
And can I spoil one? Do you care? I'll put a little thing.
Okay, I was like, I don't care.
I'll put a thing. I'm gonna spoil Black Mirror season 6 episode Zazie Beetz. I don't remember which. Here, I'm gonna find it so I don't spoil it for anyone. I'm doing a really poor job at finding it. Oh my god, where do I just find the episodes on IMDb? Oh, I'm an idiot. I feel like this IMDb layout for Black Mirror is different than the normal one. Oh, here we go. Episodes. I'm sorry. Maisie Day is the one I'm about to spoil after all that. Okay, so the setup is it takes place in the mid 2000s, in like the fury of like when the paparazzi were at like their most paparazzi-ish, and like the celebrities that they're like are in the show are like fictional, but obviously meant to be like Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, the ones that like really got
Nicole
the brunt
Richie,
of it.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I like this. Like, we're gonna kind of go back and like have some commentary on that. Well, like, and there is, but she's a werewolf at the end of it. Like the celebrity they're following is a werewolf, which is like, that's the one time where I was like, oh, that was a fun twist. I don't really know why.
Interesting.
I don't really know what this did for what you were trying to say about the. Yeah, I don't know. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think something we've maybe talked about before, and certainly is discussed frequently in media about TV and film, which is that horror is now kind of the old reliable in terms of drawing views and consistent box office. So maybe that is the intention, is kind of a market shift to reflect that. But I agree that's not like where their strength lies.
Yeah, and the other thing that disappointed me about this season is the decent episodes are really bloated. Like there's one called Beyond the Sea, which is like an hour and a half, and it's a really cool like high concept premise. It's that it's an alternate 1969 where they have NASA has developed like technology to they basically created an android replica of an astronaut that the astronaut can then take their consciousness and put in the android, so they aren't technically leaving their family. So like the physical person is up in space. They only have to wake up every like 3 months when there's like experiments to do or whatever, and then their consciousness is put into a android on Earth that's like just with their family.
Oh, I think that the people that just died in the imploded
they should have done that
Titan accident
God,
might have
idiots.
benefited from applying this concept.
Which is like a cool concept, and the two leads are Aaron Paul, who's like, whatever. Sorry.
Oh, are you I don't know, whatever on Aaron Paul?
I think I made fun of this the last episode, but like he has Imagine at the beginning of COVID song energy. Like that's his whole persona is like.
Is it?
Yeah, a little bit. I followed him on Instagram for a little while. And I was like,
okay.
Libbly.
Yeah, I don't engage with his like social media presence. And I will say I really did not like that Hulu show where he was on in a cult.
Oh, I vaguely remember that. But oh yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
It just always looked like they were torturing him at every trailer. It was like Jesse Pinkman.
I was
going to
say it's definitely like Jesse Pinkman at his most vulnerable, intended, to be drawn back. But
his performance in this one was actually kind of interesting because he does have that kind of Jesse Pinkman vibe in like a lot of his roles. And this is one where he's like playing a different kind of like stoic masculinity from a different era. Like he can't do the what up bitch in 1969 or whatever. But the other astronaut is Josh Hartnett, who I like a lot. Ooh, and they're pretty good, but it's like an hour and a half. But I do want to shout out episode 2 is called Lock Henry. I like that one, and it is a horror one that like is also I feel like is also kind of up its ass about Black Mirror, but also has something more prescient to say. It's like these two documentarians go to this little village in Scotland to make a nature documentary, and while they're there, one of them, it's their hometown, reveals a like personal like tragedy that happened, and the other one is like, well, we got to make our documentary about that, and basically forces him to like reopen these wounds and like revisit this old like haunting trauma that happened to him, and then it goes in a bunch of weird wild directions.
Okay, I will go back and revisit. I mean, I didn't abandon it. As we were talking about before we got on the mics, I have really overscheduled myself, and so it's just like, maybe I would have if I didn't have to watch these 2 movies.
Yeah.
We're recording on, it wasn't necessary. It was a cost benefit analysis in light of the amount of time that I have. Not necessarily, God, I fucking hate this. This is the worst. Yeah. But when I have time to dick around, that does sound like something that's worth dicking around about. Also, the name of the show is The Path.
Yes. Jesse Pinkman in a cult.
Yes.
Can I say, I promise we'll stop talking about Black Mirror, because I didn't even want to talk about Black Mirror this much, but I think another part that, like, when I don't like episodes of Black Mirror, I think it's because it has this streak of, like, meanness and cruelty that I don't quite enjoy. I'm trying to think. The one that really stands out to me, like a previous episode, is, I don't remember what the name is, but it's the one where, it's called Shut Up and Dance, where, like, the premise is, like, this shadowy company, like, hijacked a kid's computer and tells him, like, we took videos of you while you were watching your pornos, and if you don't do what we tell you to, it's like we're gonna release them to your family or friends or whatever. And it's just really, really mean-spirited. There's a few others like that, but there's parts in this new season that seem like, man, you're just trying to make this mean. Like, slight spoilers for that Beyond the Sea episode, but one of the characters has his avatar on Earth is killed, like, in an attack by, like, a crazy cult, which doesn't really factor in, other than it was supposed to be like a Manson type situation, and they were like, because it was 1969, but it just seemed like a really, like, vicious way for the plot to be like, how do we get rid of this guy's avatar so he gets stuck up in space? And it was like, have a cult murder his entire family, which seemed really mean. I don't know. I
do think that tone is pretty marked of, like, if I were to say that there's, like, a uniting Black Mirror style,
just that viciousness, like,
I do think that there's an undercurrent of it, and maybe it's just a matter of, like, is it effective in an episode or not? Because I don't necessarily mind something mean-spirited, especially if it's particularly perverse, but if the kind of skeleton that it's riding on doesn't have some good structure, it doesn't have good bones, it's not worth it.
Oh yeah. What about you? What have you been getting into pop culture wise?
So, a mutual friend of ours hosted a book swap at a local establishment last weekend, and I got a couple of Clive Barker paperback books that I think he specifically had brought to trade away, and I have read The Hellbound Heart before.
Yeah, I love that one.
But which, if you are not familiar, listener, is what Hellraiser is based on. But I have not read anything else by him, and I've just kind of been in a mode of, like, wanting to read horror. I've started several books that are not in that vein recently, and I just can't feel like I have any momentum behind them. So whatever, I started reading the Damnation game on Saturday.
That's the one where, like, the convict, he's, like, out of prison, and a rich guy, like, tells him to come to his house.
Like,
I read that one.
Liberates him.
To
come and work for him as his bodyguard. And it's like, it's a Faustian bargain, is the overarching plot.
Right.
But I'm about halfway through it, and I've just been, like, whenever possible between things at lunch, like, just reading it. It's like, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to be cleaning for my friends to arrive this week. Like, I don't want to be at work. I don't want to be here right now. What I want to be doing is reading this fucking book.
Beautiful, gross shit you'll ever read.
Yeah. It's, I really love the way Clive Barker writes, and I think, there's a lot of reasons why I think the Stephen King comparison gets made, but it's very readable, but oriented towards adults.
Yeah.
And I, not related to Stephen King comparison at all, but I do tend to have a preference for horror that is in the vein of, like, exploring notions of heaven and hell. I love Faustian things, including, like, movies. We'll talk about that. Some of my
Bedazzled. Yeah. Was that what that was called? That Brendan Fraser one?
I think
it was.
I think you're right.
Yeah. I just remember he wants to be an NBA player, and, like, they basically, like, he's doing, like, a Shaq impression, which is real dicey, but then his penis is small, and he has to redo it. And that's
Isn't
the whole
it
movie.
Elizabeth
like,
Berkley?
Not Berkeley, Hurley.
Yes, duh.
But an Elizabeth Berkley one would have been, hey, what do you want, love? Like a part sequel to Showgirls.
God, I think it's because I was this morning listening to the newest episode of Karina Longworth's You Must Remember This erotic 90s series. Which,
ooh, I didn't realize that. she was doing it again, and that was what the
and today's episode was about Showgirls.
Okay, cool.
And Jade also. So maybe I've got her on the mind. But I was more thinking like Mephisto. Have you ever seen?
I have not.
That it's a it was a best like foreign language film winner in the 80s. I think the early 80s. But it is was made by a Hungarian and is about a performer, like a stage performer, like in the theater, who like essentially makes a Faustian bargain with the Nazis.
Okay.
To become famous and more prominent in the theater, but it's visually very striking film. But I love shit like that, and so I like Barker in general, and I'm really specifically digging this.
Have you read his Books of Blood?
No, I literally have only read the Hellbound
These are just
Heart.
like short stories, but I really like those. And I don't remember if Books of Blood has it. It might not. It might be a different collection, but he has a story that was turned into a movie that I really like that I think did not make a mark at all. But have you ever seen Midnight Meat Train?
I've seen the movie. Yeah.
That's from a Clive Barker short. That the movie and the story are really gross and weird.
I know that the Books of Blood are have been mined repeatedly for film and are worth reading. So,
just so no Clive Barker nerds get mad at me. That one might not be a Book of Blood. I cannot remember, but I feel
he's
like
extremely prolific. Again, another part of the like King comparison. Also, last week while I was traveling for the work conference, I flew to Portland, so it's like a very long flight. The second leg of the flight is very long. It's like almost 5 hours. So I watched 2 movies on the way there and 2 movies on the way back. Okay. On the way there, I watched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Hell yeah.
And then The Blues Brothers.
Cool. Classic double feature.
It is, I feel like that's kind of a perfect Hal double feature.
Yeah,
like
a little yin and yang.
Yes, a little yin, a little yang. A little like beautiful action romance. And then a kind of silly slapstick musical that I have to stop myself from singing along to while I'm on Ativan sitting on this plane.
I have never seen one of them. Do you want to guess which one?
Oh, I don't know which one is more upsetting to me. I'm going to say Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon because I think
it's the Blues Brothers.
Really
yep.
the reason why I was making that guess is because of you are a white man who has a white dad. So I just
hella white dad
who is a little older than my dad, but in the same like generation. So that was my guess.
Honestly, that's probably the reason why I haven't seen Blues Brothers is just like rebellion against like boomer comedies of like the 70s and 80s.
I think it's one of the better ones. I mean, we've talked a little bit before about Stripes or Caddyshack or something. I mean, there are moments in it that are, shall we say, of their time.
Sure.
But I think it holds up.
Okay, yeah, it's
really well.
It is one that like since I was a teenager and I was, I don't know if I've ever like when I was a teen vocalized that like I don't want to watch that crap, but I don't know. I did kind of actively think it, but I have since been like there are probably some I should watch, but I have like a lot of blind spots or like 70s, 80s like comedies.
In that vein. Yeah, I mean, and there's certainly ones that I'll say this. I have zero interest. I didn't like watching Caddyshack as a child. I have always been, I would say, particularly reviled by poop jokes. It is much better now than it has ever been in my life, but it still is disgusting and pushes me away, especially if it's done purely in the key of humor. Like I could handle if the tone of it like reflects the disgust.
Like a poop joke is happening, but it's an artful poop joke. We like an artful.
No, I mean like vile, horrible shit. Like Solo. Like I could watch.
Okay,
Solo. I mean, it's.
I get what you mean in the vein of humor. Yeah.
Yes, I just like poop jokes are not. And again, it's much better now at age 32 than it has literally ever been in my life. But as a child, just no, absolutely not. And so it's imprinted on my mind for that reason. And Mike. My husband quite likes it, and every once in a while I was like, I'm gonna watch this and like have a great time by yourself. That is not my deal, but this movie is absolutely worth it. It fully holds up. The music is brilliant and perfectly like dispersed throughout, enough so that it is a musical because the music drives the plot forward. It's tied into the narrative. Spectacle happens where there's a break between reality and kind of the fantasy that the music propels, but it's not like constantly that way. It's not a joke a minute. There's stuff that is like a little more clever and subtle, and then there is some downright silliness. Like I think it is totally worth watching.
I'll have to watch it.
Yeah. So that was on my way there, and then on the way back I watched Casino and then The Birdcage.
Oh yeah.
Which is also which is also very much like a Hal pairing of movies.
That one's got like a firm, I feel like it's got like a thread through it, I think.
Maybe. Is it so this is something that I was wrestling with when I put on Casino. Is like, is it inappropriate to play Casino on the back of a screen where other people can watch it? I mean, it's like not edited.
I don't remember
at all.
I remember there being like a few really fucked up moments, but they're like few and far between, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you have right, certainly if you have no audio, you would just have to.
Yeah, if it was audio,
well, right. I start broadcasting the audio for Casino in first class. But I just kept thinking, like in the Head in a Vice moment, like my neighbor is gonna look over and be like, "What the fuck is this person doing?" So, in the context of that, I wanted to ask you, what makes an ideal airplane movie, in your opinion, Craig? Like, do you have feelings about this?
None, because I cannot travel on an airplane. No. I physically can, but I am. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast last time about our travel anxiety, specifically flight.
that we both.
Yeah,
really
I'm like ball up. Do not talk to me. Do not touch me. I need to just sit here and be scared and nervous, and I can't concentrate on anything, and I can't sleep. So I don't think I've ever sat down and watched a movie on an airplane.
Wow. It's also, I will say,
it's usually music that I turn up all the way so I can't hear the sounds of the engine, because that's a problem for me as well. I don't like hearing that.
the sounds on an airplane do contribute.
And for sure. Yeah. Hey, I don't think it's supposed to do that. I sit because I'm a tall person, and I don't fit in a lot of seats. So I literally like every time I basically just put my head into my lap straight down like a weirdo, like just.
Oh no, I have definitely like tried to sleep that way on airplanes. Not that it's ever effective.
I don't sleep either. I just sit there and be scared.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like I'm trying to trick myself. I will say, same until I started being prescribed Ativan, and then I can be lulled into submission if there's narrative injected into it. So I have flown planes many times, as you described, but in the last couple of years being prescribed Ativan, the couple of times I've had to fly, I can, if I take it when I get to the airport, so I don't let myself get into that super escalated, like heightened anxiety state, then I can be like, oh, I'm not on a plane right now. I am in my own personal movie theater.
In a little movie cube.
I'm in my movie cube.
I did, though, have, when I was a teenager, a portable DVD player, like a
sick,
that I took on road trips, and that's kind of similar to.
It is. So how about for that on a road trip when you were a kid? Like, what was your
I'm gonna say that I
ideal
lost
movie.
this portable DVD player very quickly, but I do remember going to my I have family that have like houses in the mountains in North Georgia, so we would do that trip a lot. And I remember my go-tos in the car. I'm clocking in at about 14 years old here. Were Freddy vs. Jason.
Oh, perfect.
And Scarface.
Perfect.
With my mom and my sister in the car.
Oh man, now I gotta list that. Like those gotta be my next two. I mean, I don't have to fly for a while, thankfully.
Okay, Freddy vs. Jason is way more fun than I remembered.
It's very fun.
I remembered it being fun as a teenager, and then I got older and I was like, that movie sucks. Like that's the worst one, and it is kind of bad. It is really bad.
But
it's fun.
The fight at the end is straight up a wrestling match. Like they are and
jumping off the shit. And coming,
it is literally like a cage match with the electricity everywhere.
So
Great movie. And then I mean Scarface, a classic. Again, it's one of those same reason I watch a bunch of Scorsese movies over and over again is there is something for me comforting in like a tense, violent drama where I can pace it. I already know what's going to happen.
That is
that is
I can zone out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And come back in for the the
CGI Freddy head that tries to attack them in the clinic in that movie. That part does not hold up. I can't remember what it is, but it's like a Freddy bug or a Freddy something that tries to attack them, and boy,
that's skittering.
Yeah.
I said this similar principle applies. I don't want to get into this movie directly right now because I need to see it again because I should not have gone to see it while I was exhausted. But on Friday I saw Asteroid City.
Yeah.
And it was simply not connecting for me. Yeah. Which again, given that I love all other Wes Anderson movies and it's not like due to his style or what other like long-standing criticisms might be connected to, it's not that. I think it's like I got in at 12:30 a.m. Woke up, went to go see it after traveling for 5 days, but I came home after watching it and immediately watched Eastern Promises.
Hell yeah.
Because I was like, I need a palate cleanser, and what I need is reliable, violent drama that is comfortable to me.
Awesome fight scene in the bathhouse.
My God.
More men need to be like just butt-ass naked fighting in a... That was
Viggo Mortensen and David Cronenberg are really just like one of the most inspired pairs of our time. I'm really glad they've gotten to make several movies together.
Yeah.
And
History of Violence was like a formative movie for me as like a little movie lover. I also wrongfully had candy thrown at me in the theater when I saw History of Violence.
I think you told me about this, like somewhat
a friend that I was
near
with,
you, right?
I was like, I hope he doesn't listen. I haven't seen this person in 20 years.
Fuck you, guy.
He's just an annoying. Honestly, like I'll take the L and the candy being thrown at me for inviting him to this movie in the first place because I should have known that was gonna happen. But he talked all the way through History of Violence, and then this woman turned around and thought it was me and threw a handful of Skittles at me.
I can't guarantee that I would throw Skittles because Skittles are precious and not be wasted. But if I went to go see a new Cronenberg movie and someone was talking through it, I would probably yell at them.
I was having all these thoughts because I wanted to be angry, but at the same time I was like, well,
I've done this to myself.
She got the wrong target, but like the heart was in the right place.
She's throwing them at you, you're turning around, I agree with you.
Fuck, I closed my little thing that so what's going on in the world that's either got you celebrating or living in despair?
Yeah, so I just wanted to call attention to something that's going on right now in Tampa, Florida. The Tampa 5. Have you heard about them at all?
Yeah. The arrested for protesting.
Yeah. So in early March, there were 5 protesters that were arrested at a Students for a Democratic Society rally in support of like diversity initiatives, countering DeSantis's efforts through HB 999 to ban DEI efforts in the state of Florida, which, I mean, he has successfully done since then. And they were charged with battery against a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest without violence, and disrupting a campus function. 4 of them were arrested that day, and 1 of them was arrested after the fact. They pled not guilty in May. Basically what happened is that a protest marched into a building on USF, which is University of South Florida, if you're not familiar, campus to demand a meeting with USF President Rhea Law and request that she stand against DeSantis' anti-DEI efforts. Officers started removing people. There was some reporting saying that another meeting in the building thought that there was like an active shooter, and that's what triggered the police being there. But basically someone was being pulled on by a cop, and other protesters attempted to like de-arrest her or break her free. And there are videos that show officers yanking on people's arms and escalating. But now these 5 people are all being charged with like felonies over a situation that was instigated by cops, shockingly, and while they were trying to stand against DeSantis's like racist, sexist, transphobic efforts to control institutes of higher ed. And on June 24th, 2023, so this last weekend, a coalition, including the AFL-CIO, Asks Me, Students for a Democratic Society, the Tampa Community Action Committee, the NAACP, the ACLU, and Florida Rising all hosted an event called Defend the Tampa 5, Civil Liberties in the Era of Ron DeSantis. I'm going to put this forth, one, because the 5 people who are facing charges need our support, and 2, because I think it's a great example of the ways in which the struggles of labor, student organizing, and civil liberties defense can all be combined, and solidaristic action is possible. Also a contingency from the TCAC, or the Tallahassee Community Action Committee, went, so I thought that was pretty cool. People around the state mobilizing together to stand against police violence. Their next hearing is July 12th. We'll drop some links on Twitter and in the description so that you can read more about that if you're interested and want to learn about how to support them. How about you, Craig?
Yeah, so there was kind of a minor incident that happened over the weekend, but I got kind of sucked down a Twitter hole of like just seeing like idiots reacting to it.
Twitter's holes are hungry. Oh, God, they want to suck you down them.
I told you last week that I read the How to Break Up with Your Phone book, which like Twitter was the hardest one. Like,
yeah,
it's not like hippie like throw your phone out the window and never see it again. It's like give yourself time. But Twitter is really the one where I'm like, well, my time has passed and I'm still scrolling.
There's just a monkey in my brain saying, press the dopamine button, press the dopamine button.
Yeah. So this week's there was a rally. Well, obviously, there's pride marches going on across the country. There was one. Oregon City hosted their first ever pride event last Saturday, and it went pretty well, despite the minor story that I'm going to talk about. But there was a contingency of Proud Boys who showed up to protest the pride event, and a video started circulating online of a bunch of Proud Boys in a fist fight with a bunch of like blue polo wearing khaki like dorks, and basically what came out was the blue khaki dorks were like basically like American Front, but they call themselves Rose City Nationalists, that were started by like a break-off contingency of the Proud Boys, and basically this all boiled down to like interpersonal beef. Like the dude who ran the Orange or Rose City Nationals had a problem with the Proud Boys. They got in a fight, but the part that had me down the Twitter hole was following like the different ways that right-wing reactionaries like try to use the story, and like so quickly too. So I listen to this podcast called Knowledge Fight, which is an Alex Jones podcast where like they just basically report back on what Alex Jones is saying every week. But one of the hosts has this analogy he always uses about like the race for the like controlling the right-wing narrative is like when an event happens that's just wet concrete, and like every like right-wing ding-dong is just rushing to make sure they can etch their narrative into the concrete before it dries to like which one is going to stick the best.
I mean, to be fair, like that approach to misinformation is successful.
Yeah,
because
100%. Yeah, I mean, they're talking about like Alex Jones, like he's the master of like, if I scratch my name hard enough in the wet concrete, then my version is true.
Right, and no one remembers or bothers to check on the other ones.
Yeah.
And not just right-wingers, but then that's how the story is understood in the broader mediascape.
But there was an interesting like division amongst how people were responding to it, and both kind of scary. But there was the one that was like, is trying to clearly like reform the image of the Proud Boys. So like, for instance, the Daily Mail put out a article basically saying that the Proud Boys unmasked a group of neo-Nazis, like framing it that way, which is clearly like trying to make the Proud Boys more palatable.
Or like literally the Spider-Man meme, right? Like, unmasked Nazis
right,
pointing at unmasked Nazis. Okay, guys.
And then the other more interesting one, which was I saw because it was echoed and magnified by Tim Pool, internet's dumbest boy. He just tweeted a link and said, because they were like, the Proud Boys were like punching the dudes in the khaki pants, and he says it's illegal to assault a federal officer, basically implying that the feds were the ones in the khaki pants and the blue shirts, like trying to basically like trap the Proud Boys or whatever. So like he's trying to act like he's basically, Tim Pool is carrying water for the Proud Boys by trying to pretend like he's against the Proud Boys and saying what they did was actually illegal. He's basically just assuming the premise that the other fascists were feds.
Cops.
Yeah. So yeah, that was that. I lost a lot of time just scrolling down morons responding to this.
I would say that he wears those beanies to hide lobotomy scars, but they do lobotomies through your nose. So I need another explanation.
He's insane. Do you watch Majority Report? Did you see that Emma Vigeland went on?
Yes, I have been. That was one of my Twitter holes yesterday. Where he
not stopped talking about it. It's like every day he's like, by the way, and he's got to like defend like what a moron he looks like. And but my favorite one was like Emma Vigeland was then on the Majority Report talking about it and was like, and
well, provide a little bit of context.
I'm sorry.
Many of our listeners, I think, are probably not down at least the same holes. You know that the Ito comic that's like about people finding the holes that are the shape of their body, like in the mountain, and they go into the hole, cool. And they're like, "This is my hole." It's like,
that was like that ABC show, The Cutout, where you had to jump through the.
Yes, exactly, except like body horror in its aura, right? But that's how Twitter is. It's like, you know, you're like, this is my hole, and I'm like, this is my hole.
And then
there's probably some listeners that are like, I can't see into that hole.
The Majority Report is a podcast, syndicated radio show somewhere, probably YouTube channel. It's run by Sammy Cedar, longtime like friendly radio voice for like the left, and Emma Vigeland is his co-host on the Majority Report, and so she went on Tim Pool, and it was very funny. She did a great job. She made him look like an idiot, and then afterwards
which involved filming at his compound,
because he won't do Zoom anymore because he wants people to come to his weird like chicken ranch, but he has a skate park on his compound, and that's always like a joke on the Majority Report. So Sam asked, like, did you get to see the skate park? And she's like, no, they didn't show it to me. They seemed like they didn't really want me to see it or whatever. Just kind of making an offhand joke. And Tim Pool is on a rant on his show that's like,
she walked through. It's at the front of the compound. She, of course, saw it. She's lying.
But my favorite part is like, he tweeted out a picture and he's like, see, it's right here in the front, and like showing there's a quarter pipe, but in the picture he's like skating. He's doing like a sick skate like skate trick, and I'm like, God, you're such a nerd. What a loser.
A little bit of humble brag while I refute a joke that a woman made.
Let me own you and do this gnarly flip.
Ollie's away or whatever.
God, what a dweeb.
I will say, listeners, if that is not your hole, you know, if your Twitter hole is not our Twitter hole, I apologize for subjecting you to the madness.
Oh, I don't. I love it.
So, shall we move into talking about another hole?
Another hole.
A whole lot of bullshit.
Yeah, Gran Torino.
Yeah.
It's a car. That is a really strong metaphor for something. I don't know why I had such a big problem with that I was like, what the fuck? Why is this the central metaphor of this movie?
I don't mind. Like, I think it serves the function that it needs to in the movie.
It's a symbol, like right.
Yeah. It is a symbol of his relationship with Tao, and as that evolves, so too does like the.
Yeah, I guess what I would have liked more of was like more diving into what that symbol exactly represents, other than like he tried to steal it and it's his like prized possession.
I think the whole thing about Clint Eastwood's filmmaking that we've, at least these later days that we've been covering, that we covered with American Sniper and we're covering with Gran Torino, and then we'll cover in a couple of weeks with The Mule, is that he is very much like a ABC, like by the books filmmaker, right? Like there's 100%. Not a lot of creativity, innovation, visual narrative or otherwise. Yeah. And so I think it feels very like, to me, yes, in this movie, the car is his fixation, and as his heart opens to this young boy that he is helping cultivate and mentor, then this young boy can have access to the car too. Like it's simply like, I don't think there is subtext. Like I think it's literally just the text. You know, it's like Build-A-Bear, but it's like Build a Movie.
Oh my god, Clint Eastwood Build-A-Bear movie is what I want to.
You know how they've been they've been making all those movies that are about I mean, they always rely on IP, but you know, like Air or the Tetris movie, which I will say the Tetris movie was actually worth watching. It's on, I'm trying to remember where Mike and I watched it, maybe Apple Plus. It was actually better than I thought it was going to be, but that's what we need is Clint Eastwood makes a Build-A-Bear IP into a film.
Put this one in the Paisley overalls. Extra stuffing.
The extras, that was good.
Thank you.
I'm impressed.
Speaking on Gran Torino, I do want to say that I did a little extra credit for this episode, and I also watched Dirty Harry, which is a movie I've never seen before. And Dirty Harry's cool. Have you ever seen Dirty Harry?
I have not.
It's like just kind of a standard thriller directed by Don Siegel, like a police detective who doesn't do things by the books. And there's a killer terrorizing San Francisco. He's like sniping people from rooftops, and he's got to catch him. And it's just like really like it's a great San Francisco movie. Like it just feels like grimy and like you really get like a feel for like the city, and it's just a fun movie. But there are hella similarities between that and Gran Torino. Specifically that the protagonists are kind of like the same guy at different ages of their life. So Dirty Harry, the protagonist, played by Clint Eastwood, is nearly identical to Walt Kowalski in Gran Torino. They're both these racist yet competent in ways that appeal mostly to like male boomers' ideas of like the ideal masculinity. However, Dirty Harry was made in 1971, the same year that San Francisco's public school system instituted their desegregation plan, and just 7 years after the Civil Rights Act. And San Francisco, obviously a large metropolitan area with a history of racism, especially towards Asian folks that were coming over. But there is all this is to say that in Dirty Harry, the protagonist's racism is more treated like a character foible. Like Harry Callahan's bigotry is reflective of that moment, and ultimately, like the film is kind of commenting on that. Whereas I feel like in Gran Torino, it's kind of not as a foible as much as it's just like baked into the premise. You need to accept that this guy is racist. That is just who he is, and if you don't accept him at that, well, then you don't allow him the opportunity to learn.
And also look at all of the Asian people accepting his anti-Asian racism.
Yeah, that's the part that's truly incredible in Gran Torino, is the amount of people that are like, oh,
literally
more slurs, please.
No one is like, ever says
can you not call me
anything.
Yeah.
Literally ever.
Yeah.
At any point.
Yeah, and I think that it's so in Gran Torino, he's playing this version of Harry Callahan, this like grizzled and stoic, the strong silent type. But in Gran Torino, it's not reflective of anything like a greater moment in American culture. It's not commenting on anything. It's just purely like reactionary, like purely just an old man who's like his ways are dying and he's mad about it. Is kind of just the general thesis of Gran Torino. I don't know. Am I off on that assessment of?
I mean, I do think it is reflective of a bigger moment in American history in the sense that, like, as you know, what Edward Benio Silva calls like colorblind racism took hold in America. The version of racism that he is enacting and spreading is of a prior era, but he is attempting to live out the principles of colorblind racism while still expressing the ideas of the former. So I think it does speak to, I think, the kind of discordant conflict of boomers at the brink of societal shift. But I don't think it's reflecting on that in a particularly insightful way, which we'll dig into.
It's just whining. It's whiny. Like, this movie's whiny. So is The Mule, but not to the same degree. Oh, this is a spoiler. I'm sorry. We're maybe gonna watch another Clint Eastwood movie. No,
I already said yeah. I've said it several times.
But one central part of this movie that I think we really need to dig in on and give some more context to is, let's just do a brief overview of the kind of plot of this movie. Essentially, the movie begins with this old man, Walt Kowalski. His wife has just died, and like she's kind of painted to be like the saint of the couple. Like, she's the one that, you know, the heart of this old married couple. And he's this crotchety old man that the only thing he ever loved in this world was the wife, and like everyone else, even his own sons and their family, can kind of go to hell because I don't know, they're on their phones too much, I guess, is why he. And
also his son makes or sells Japanese cars, and Clint Eastwood used to make Fords and is mad that his son is peddling
it's a real betrayal.
Foreign-made cars.
But yeah, and he lives in a neighborhood in like this suburb of Detroit that, you know, probably at one time was like upper middle class, mostly white people. And in the setting of this movie, it has become a neighborhood of mostly Asian folks, specifically Hmong people. And that becomes a kind of running thing in the movie, mostly so Clint Eastwood can make jokes about their culture and call them Hmong, which, boy, they go to the well a lot on like certain, like, did you hear me make that slur this one time? If not, let me do it 2 to 3 more times.
There are so many racial slurs in this movie.
Oh, I was gonna write them down. I was like, let's see what a flavor we get, and then like 5 minutes in, I was like, well, it's just all of them. It's just all of them. There's no, what's even the
it's a word cloud of racism.
Yeah. So I think because this movie doesn't give a lot of context to like the Hmong people, the sister character kind of gives like a brief, like, oh, you silly old racist man, let me give you like a primer. But we don't hear a lot. So we wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit. And I do want to say that I don't believe like Clint Eastwood is a bigot at heart. I don't think that.
I do.
You do? Okay. I think he is that he sees that like death knell of like white America. Well, that is racist.
Yeah.
He's a racist. Fuck him. I don't care.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. He also, it's like he's just doing the exact thing that you said. He's like, he's a colorblind racist, and trying to. Anyways, let's just get into what the Hmong people and what like exactly kind of where they came from, because the movie doesn't do that to a great degree. So yeah, Walt and his family have presumably moved into this neighborhood of upper class white folks, and over the last 50 years, this neighborhood is mostly now people of Southeast Asian descent, specifically the Hmong. And I think for the purpose of this movie, we need a full understanding of who these Hmong people are.
The Hmong people are not a nationality, but rather an ethnic group from Southeast Asia. They were first in China as early as 2700 BC, but where exactly still remains a little bit of a mystery. The most popular theory from sociologists and anthropologists contend that the ancestors of the Hmong were one of the first civilizations to reside in the areas around the Yellow River in northern China. And over time, they were pushed into the southwest regions of China by other ethnic groups who persecuted them for their cultural differences. The Han Dynasty of the 3rd century was especially hostile to the Hmong people, causing them to flee further south and diffusing the Hmong people amongst southwest China and what is modern-day Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand.
And by the time the Vietnam War broke out, large concentrations of the Hmong people were living in Laos and were caught square in the middle of Vietnam's civil war. Some Hmong were recruited by local communist regimes to fight on behalf of North Vietnam, but more of the Hmong people in Laos fought for South Vietnam after being recruited by a shadowy organization of perverts and degenerates known as the Central Intelligence Agency.
That's insulting to perverts and degenerates.
When the Vietnam War ended, the Hmong people, seen as traitors by the victorious North Vietnam, fled Laos in large numbers for fear of persecution. From 1975 to 1997, a refugee flight of roughly 130,000 saw the Hmong people flee Laos for refugee and resettlement camps in Thailand. However, the last refugee camp in Thailand closed in 1997, and at that point, there are still tens of thousands of Hmong people without homes and worried about persecution who took refuge at a Buddhist monastery. There's a lot of really good information about the Hmong people, where I kind of did a little bit of research here on the Hmong American Center's website, as well as the International Institute of Minnesota.
The United States meddling stirred up lasting latent consequences. Who'da thunk it? In the 2000s, the USA and Thailand devised a resettlement plan for about 15,000 Hmong people still living in refuge. And between 2004 and 2006, the majority of these people moved to California, North Carolina, and important to our story here, the Midwest. Now, populations are shaped and in-group, out-group dynamics are made and remade through policy. In discussing migration, demographers often talk about push and pull factors that motivate or compel people to move, and how these factors both are contingent on the characteristics of the group and create a selection effect. So what I mean by this, for example, is that people who must forcibly migrate in the first place are vulnerable and usually don't have many resources to start with. And also, those who have to take refuge may lose additional resources or become increasingly vulnerable. So why I'm bringing this up in the context of what we're talking about here is that setting the stage for this movie, it explains why Hmong people that are in Detroit specifically might be particularly impoverished, right? Because the people that are forced into being refugees don't have a lot of resources in the first place as a result of the dynamics that pushed them to migrate. And then also there are additional vulnerabilities that might prevent them from accruing additional resources once they're in their place, wherever they've settled. So not speaking the language or not having educational credentials that align with where they've ended up, that kind of thing. Now, Clint doesn't say all of that,
Yep.
And I'm not sure that he has any interest in grasping micro-level context. He's a little too focused on individualistic narratives of moral heroism, particularly his own, and moral villainy, particularly that of people of color. But we see a modicum of this context in the setting that he has crafted. A multi-generational household of impoverished people stuck without many legitimate options for mobility. That is, until Wally gets involved.
He did it. Yeah, there is interesting stuff at the core of this movie. I think a way better movie is make Tao the protagonist, the primary protagonist, and follow him, not Walt, who's first off, just as a problem with this movie, he's a boring character. There's not a lot to hold on to with that character in general.
There's no interiority.
Yeah, it's
very, that's the thing about a character that is standoffish and alienated and stoic, is that is also the audience's
opinion of
access to the narrative. And I'm not saying there are no ways in which that kind of character, but when we're supposed to be on a moral journey, and that's very much what this movie is
when
doing.
You're supposed to be making him like redeemable, then he's got to have something to hang on to.
Right. But some of the only times we see him emoting are him like rubbing a picture of his dead wife.
He rubs those pictures really good though. He's emoting when he's like actively hating his children to their face.
That's a good point. Emotions are also negative.
This movie's so weird. Like, this movie's just like assumes like most dads hate their sons, right? Like, there's not a lot of pushback, and the sons are just like two fucking Midwest dopes who are kind of like, yeah, we probably deserve to be hated by our dads. We're kind of idiots.
Let's get them in a retirement home. I don't know why we're like making them Italian Americans, but haven't we been through enough? We have to like attribute their behavior to them. This relates to something that I wanted to bring up regarding a concept that sociologists sometimes call fictive kin, or sometimes you might hear people refer to it as like created family. Or chosen family, is that this movie is doing something very interesting with this concept where the actual familial ties that Clint Eastwood's character Walt has are disrupted, and they aren't he doesn't trust them, and he doesn't like them, and they don't have much in common.
Just mean to him.
Right. Well, and also they're mean. Like it's mean in both directions. Yeah. Like there's no love lost.
Granddaughter.
Right. God, I want to talk about her outfit in a second.
Do you know who that actress? That's Dreama Walker, I think her name is.
No.
She's in this really. I really like this movie, but it is a tough watch, called Compliance, which is based on a true story of a dude calling fast food restaurants and convincing them that
I am familiar with that story.
Cop, and he needed them to investigate certain people in the restaurant, which like led to him instructing like seemingly normal people to like commit sexual assault on like innocent people or whatever. But she is the person who's being assaulted in that movie Compliance. And she's really great in it.
She's also in R.I.P. Miss It, Don't Trust the Bitch in Apartment 23.
Oh, I couldn't tell if that was an ironic Miss It.
No, I quite liked that show.
I've never seen an episode, so I didn't.
Well, there's not very much of it, so if you wish to watch it, I think they're like, I'm trying to, there was like 2 seasons and then they canceled it. I haven't revisited it in a while. Yeah, there's 2 seasons and then they canceled it.
Is that Kristen Ritter?
Yes. Yeah. God, love her. That's my ideal woman.
I've seen her in a lot is Breaking Bad, and then Jessica Jones.
And this.
Which
you haven't seen yet.
I was thinking Gran Torino. I was like, yeah, I loved her in Gran Torino.
Yes, of course.
Wait, hold on. That's not how we got her.
She's brilliant in it. But
Clint Eastwood let her die on heroin.
I know, man. God. She deserved it.
She deserves it.
This is what you
Harlot.
Get. This is what you get. Bitch. Sorry, he says bitch in the other movie we're going to talk about while talking about his ex-wife, not in this movie.
He's a lot more fun in that one. We'll get to it, but he's a lot more fun in that one.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the mule, but I will say, another digression off the digression. The granddaughter's outfit was driving me insane. It makes no sense.
What was it? I don't remember.
Okay, in the outfit that she's wearing for the longest period of time that we see her, she's wearing what I would consider to be like hippie clothes, like clothes that you would get at a crystal store or in like an artistic community where it's like those layers of almost like kind of tie-dyed, not like bright color tie-dye, but tie-dyed fabric that are kind of layered on top of each other. It was more popular in the early 2000s, but you can go to Railroad Square here in Tallahassee or lots of places in Portland where I just was and see people dressed like this. So that was not in and of itself okay. Like the tank top and the skirt, fine. Then she was wearing a cropped short sleeve hoodie that was like plaid and kind of like pop punky.
All right.
And then her hair is in ringlets.
That I did notice.
And I was just like, what are we doing here? Who dressed this young woman? Okay, I was a teenager when this movie came out, as were you. I ain't never seen a teenager dressed like that at that time. It was like Hot Topic and the Crystal Portal fucked and bird this abomination. And I hated it. But anyway, back to the fictive Kim point. I just want to say,
put her in ringlets.
Right.
Give her ringlets.
What is this Shirley Temple goes pop punk moment? I hate it.
Make her look like Avril Lavigne.
That's what Clint Eastwood thinks Avril Lavigne looked like.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Woo!
She said she wanted a skater boy. He growls in this movie. I know. Okay. He is. If anyone is thinking I'm being annoying, I'm just doing it in his voice of this whole movie.
To the point where I kept cackling, because as we've talked about before, I watch movies with subtitles on 100% of the time, if available to me, and growls in like brackets was constantly on the screen. Yeah, like just
all the time. Whether it's his granddaughter's not wearing a shirt that he likes, or his nurse is Chinese, or whatever. Just
that was a doctor. Okay.
Oh, I was thinking of the one that no. He couldn't let it up. He took 2 shots because yes, he's racist to the doctor, but I think it's a different nurse that comes out and gets his name wrong. She's like Mr. Kowski,
in the
and
second. He's like, he's constantly growling. At one point in time while watching this, Mike turned to me and said, "Oh my God, Clint's doing Batman," and then he paused and went, "Oh wait, no, he's doing Saw." Both of them are
100%
are astute.
I feel so bad for like how many Asian actors did like a day of work and got called a slur.
Well, calling
and then like,
right.
That's everyone. Round of applause for our actor here today. They got called a awful word for 30 hours straight, and you're done.
Right. Like, I will say that one of the things that I think we talked about with American Sniper is that Clint does not like to do multiple
notorious
shoots.
For
so, at least succinct and to the point. So he's probably only saying each given line one time.
I'm only going to call you a slur one time, so you better hit your line right. But it's not just Asian people, though.
Oh, no. It's across...
Yeah.
It's across the board.
Like, Asian people get the most slurs, but the depictions of other minority groups are like just the most base, like whatever. Obviously, like whatever Clint Eastwood thinks that minority group looks like act like. Do you know
those like old fashioned, like they used to be put forth in scientific publications or in Time magazine at the turn of the century, like the other turn of the century. Or Life magazine or whatever, where it's like kind of taking the like racial phenotypes and then listing out things like by crime, like Irish people and black people committed this much of this crime or whatever. It's like very much in line with like phrenology, just general race science, but like put forth in graphic form. I felt like that was like on his mood board for this, 100%. Like he was like, we gotta get the Polacks, we gotta get black folks.
I feel like black people get it the worst in this movie because really there's only one scene, if I remember, with like black folks in it.
Agree. I think it's worst in terms of like dehumanization.
Yeah, because they're clearly just such stereotypes that were invented in Clint Eastwood's mind. Actually, to be fair, he did not write this. I did look it up. It was 2 other dorks that wrote it.
Yeah, and it's still the same. One of them is the same guy that wrote The Mule.
The Mule?
Yeah.
Well, when you get a good thing,
Nick Schneck, I think is his.
It's a beautiful name.
His name.
Excuse you. Really this one. But yeah, the depictions of, first off, like they're just. These black folks are just harassing a young woman. Is the only black folks we see in the movie are just harassing a young woman.
And isn't that his son, the white guy?
It is.
That is Scott, right?
That is Scott Eastwood,
which is wild.
Legendary actor. And when we get to The Mule, his daughter is in The Mule.
Yeah, she's one of my least favorite parts. I really.
Oh my god! I thought you were about to have like a confession, and you were like, "I'm gonna let you know that she's one of my favorites." Like I follow. Like I thought you were about to be like, "I am a big Allison Eastwood fan."
No, okay. We'll wait till next episode, but I'll just say the stuff surrounding her is one of my least favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah.
But Scott is doing a great job acting like a shriveled piece of shit.
Yeah. Oh my god. There is a draft of this movie where he said the W word. I don't want to say it in that scene. Like I guarantee you, there was a draft where like he was like, I gotta get one in on him too.
In 2008.
100%.
That would have been right in line.
Also, like, I think he fucking hates Scott. Like, first of all, like, all these movies we're gonna watch are about how like an old man hates his family.
Fair.
And then Scott gets
true.
like the shittiest role of all. Like every time he's put his family in a role, like Scott's just a bumbling moron.
It's true, and he's in this movie for
5 seconds.
Yeah, like I mean,
hey, I'm Trey.
Like literally, I would say maybe 90 seconds.
Yeah, he calls him a pussy, and then he's gone.
Yeah, and he has very few lines, and most of the scene that he's in, he's not even on screen. Yeah. He is just off screen while the main action is happening.
Of his face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this like? Did Scott not have a SAG card at this time, and he was just like trying to get him SAG membership? Because that's how this reads to me. Is like you were in the movie for X amount of time.
I 100% bet you're right. Because he was pretty young, right? He probably would have been like early 20s.
He looked pretty young, yeah.
I 100% bet that's it.
But you're right. This movie is racist towards a lot of different groups of people. It's racist towards Asian people, as you've mentioned. It's racist towards Black people. The depiction of this group of 3 young Black men or young Black teens, it's a little unclear, who are harassing and threatening to assault Sue, the sister of the Hmong family that he being Walt primarily has interactions with. We see that there are some like white ethnic slurs exchanged. I always love some anti-Italian-X racism thrown in there as an Italian American.
Yeah, I was gonna say like I don't, maybe you just didn't watch the movie close enough, because if you miss the barbershop scenes, then you know that the slurs are just how us guys communicate.
I just need to know, like, does John Carroll Lynch
I feel so bad for him.
I don't feel bad for him, because I think what's happening here is that he was desperate to work with Clint
Eastwood, and he's like, I'll take whatever.
And he was like, sure, I can show up for a set and we just like say awful, like misogynistic and like vaguely racist, because they're not talking about other races in that. Like, they're not talking about people of color in that scene.
That's the trick.
It's all white
that's
ethnic.
Because, like, if they were like, hey, we can say whatever, and then they just drop, like, the N-word, like, Clint Eastwood knows that's not going to fly.
Right.
So you're like, let me tone it, let me make it, this is the palatable racism.
It's
that
just
we can
the jocular,
yeah.
It's the jocular, like, oh, we hit each other on the shoulder. It's like the discourse version of we punch each other in the shoulder.
It's like hanging out with my dad's friends. Literally is what the, like, Now I've obviously put judgment on my dad's friends when I say this next. Dad, I don't know if you're listening to this, but don't take anything too personal.
Skip ahead 2 to 3 minutes, or don't listen and reflect.
So many people that are like this guy. Like, I think that's partly why I disliked it so much. Is like this guy reminds me of so many like white boomers that I personally know that are like, hey, a little rough around the edges, but he's a nice guy or whatever. And I'm like, no, he's an asshole. Why are we doing this? I don't understand. Like, I've heard that version of the John Carroll Lynch, Clint Eastwood barbershop talk so many times that I just had no patience for it. But I will say that I did have my only like genuine smile. I was like, I like that. That was cute. In the John Carroll Lynch scene, which is when Tao finally like unloads on him, and he just like has a belly laugh. I like that.
Yeah,
I was like, John Carroll Lynch.
He is. I mean, it just like speaks to John Carroll Lynch like being a good actor and a.
I almost just spilled all my wine on myself.
Your life flashed before your eyes. But he is like a warm presence. You know, on screen, which is welcome in the context of Walt being so cold and impenetrable, and then basically with the exception of Sue and towards the very end with Tao, just not having any like insight internally with them, and it being all through Walt's eyes and perspective, basically. That, you know, at least in that moment, when he's not saying shitty things about Polacks or whatever, he is pleasant, and he's like smiling, and he's a man that looks like he would give a good hug.
100%. I really like John Carroll Lynch. He's just like a great, solid actor.
I like big dudes that are good at playing bad.
Yeah.
But also can be quite warm.
Cause is he the Zodiac killer in Zodiac?
Yes, he is.
And he's so good in that. I always get him confused with another guy that it's a 3-part like bald white guy of the same like age-ish, and now I can't remember who it is, but I always get those two confused.
There is the other person I'm thinking of in this vein plays the bad dude in True Detective, and he's also in Billions.
Oh, I think that is exactly who I'm thinking of. Is it the same
guy?
What is his name? That might be exactly who I'm thinking of.
Mike really, really likes him, and like always is pointing him out when he's in things.
The Yellow King.
Yes, but I forget.
Oh my god, I'm going to have to find it now.
I know.
Here we go. Cut this out if we need to.
We're doing a great job.
And I think he's only in like one episode of True Detective, so if you're just going to the IMDb, because he's only in like the final episode, I think.
Reoccurring cast. Okay, yeah, you have to cut this out because we're just like taking forever.
True Detective.
What the fuck is this guy's goddamn
Yellow
name?
King actor. Oh, this is Glenn Fleshler. That's not who I was thinking of. But you're right. That is who it is. His name's Glenn Fleshler. He's in Billions and True Detective, but that's not the one I was thinking of. Well, we solved the mystery. It's
Glenn
very
Fleshler.
Exciting.
But I will say, like, I would say similar things
he
about
does have
him.
John Carroll Lynch energy.
Yeah, they're kind of
sure.
in the same vein, like big, towering dudes that can go. They go both ways.
They can, They can be
thereby sexually terrifying and also warm and friendly. So yes, it was nice. It was nice to see John Carroll Lynch, but this had to have just been a bucket list moment for him. Like that's the only explanation that I have.
Okay, wait, hold on. Is it also John Carroll Lynch in that season of American Horror Story? Because if it's not, that's who I'm thinking.
The clown.
I thought I figured it out.
You're talking about the clown in the Carnival season, which is 4, I think.
Maybe. Yeah. That is what I'm talking about. And
yes.
If that is John Carroll Lynch, then I do not know who I'm still. Because I was like, maybe that's who it was, but no, that's also John Carroll Lynch. He's a chameleon. He looks like so many different versions of John
himself.
Carroll Lynch.
Okay, so I will say the only time that I agree with with Walt's prejudice is his anti-Catholic screeds. Every time he would like tell the priest boy to shut the fuck up or leave him alone or just simply growl at him, I was like, yes, that is an appropriate response.
And that fucking priest is so whiny and like
so boyish. I mean, they really found a man that barely looks like an adult.
God, it was just like, I don't know. I did not like that character. It was annoying. I was on Walt's side every time that guy popped up. I was like, get out of here, scram.
My wife is dead.
Yeah, I don't need
you have
here.
No obligation to me. Don't you have like a full ass parish to attend to?
Yeah.
Like, no, just I like that. Like, this is his like activism is like he's going to convert.
Yeah, he's like, I gotta get this
one crotchety old man. And also go stand outside a house where he thinks gang violence is going to occur.
What was he going to do? I didn't understand.
I think he was just going to have the cops intervene.
But they were already there. That was my favorite part. He was like,
well, they were there with him.
I'm staying. And they're like, no, you're not. And he's like, okay. I was like, why even put that in the movie?
He gave up. Look at his faith crumble.
God. One other thing I want to talk about is when I was first watching it, I was like, these actors are bad. And then I was like, no, these are written poorly because it's like an old man's version of like what the young kids are talking about. And I'm specifically talking about the way that like Tao and Tao's like cousin and the cousin like gang all interact with each other. Just feels like so like grandpa watched The Outsiders again and now is trying to write a movie or whatever.
One day of MTV was watched in 2007.
Like, this is Liddy.
Damn, if they said that, talk about prescient.
That would have been awesome. I would have been like, this is the best movie I've ever seen.
Oh my God.
But yeah, at least for the plot of the movie. So that is kind of what propels the movie forward, which kind of never made sense to me. I never understood why they're this mad at Tao other than like he's a dork and he didn't steal the car. Is that like...
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me on the level of, one, as we kind of talked about during the intro to the film, like if you are part of a community or in your place or in a place that really lacks economic mobility, then gangs or like other kind of informal groups can be an opportunity to form new community and to pursue illicit economic like chances, right? And so I think on one hand, him not doing it means that he has information about their criminal activity, and so there's like a blackmail function. But then I also just think there's like just simply the community expectation, like where are you going to go, dude? Like, do you think you're better than us? So I think they make sense. I agree that their dialogue and the way they interact with each other is such a distance from what that would actually look like.
They're literally like, they all feel like Kiefer Sutherland in Stand By Me, where they're like just that like, we're a gang because we say we are, kid, or like whatever. And I was like, all right, you guys are weird. I don't know. But for the plot of the movie, like, so Tao's cousin is involved in some sort of gang, and they are trying to recruit him, and they tell him to steal Clint Eastwood's old Gran Torino car, this car that he loves.
Pew, pew, pew.
And Tao fails and then becomes like a marked man for his cousin's gang, basically.
And also the women in his family
that is brutal.
Have for what the movie ascribes to traditional and cultural reasons, believe that he owes a debt to Walt. So these two opposing reactions to the same activity are what pushes the movie forward, kind of the contradictions between the two, and how Walt and Tao, and by extension like kind of the rest of Tao's family, are kind of held in a vice like by these opposing forces.
Yeah. And I really like the performances from the sister. I think she's really good, and Grandma is really funny every time like she gets a scene where
she does a lot of acting with just her face.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's a good example on the level of like directorial decisions or whatever, or writing, but like in terms of like her performance of, I don't speak the language that is the predominant language of this film. She's doing a lot of face acting.
She's doing it.
And given one of the only other people that gives Walt the stank.
For real though, that's what it needs, is more people like pushing back on him, at least, because like that's my like I do like the girl that plays Sue. I like that performance. She's pretty good, but that character is like so often like, silly Walt, we don't say those words, and like it's not this person's job to teach you to not be a racist, which is like
it's also, I mean, I think in real life like it's, I don't want to say more complex than that, but like I do think there are reasons why she would choose to educate him.
Yeah,
right?
I guess her brother is like kind of wrapped up with him, and like she has
yes, and also like, you know, she is clearly drawn to be like particularly empathetic, and also she does seem like genuinely interested in this old man that who has seemingly very few social connections and has continued to stay in this neighborhood as it's changed around him. I think the thing for me is like that at no point in time is there ever like she's not speaking up against him, right? Like there's no like don't say that, you know, right, yeah. Like it's just she goes okay and takes his like water off her back, or you know, water that rolls off of her back. It's not, her performance is really great, and she is kind of a gem. Yeah. That when she's on screen,
especially that she has to do a lot of the exposition, which is written really clunkily. Like, well, oh, silly Walt, we're Hmong people. We came from here. Like, she has to do a lot of the like information download, which is not easy to do. But I do get the sense that she is like really inhabiting kind of almost the noble savage, like
very much. That's what I mean. Is that she's like she's the translator. Who helps him deftly navigate this new world that he's entering, and has information and imparts it to him, but always does it with kindness, and there are no bumps in that, you know, like she's not upset. I mean, this is jumping ahead, but maybe we could talk about how the fact that she was like violently assaulted and raped is basically because of Walt's actions. Like, now Walt didn't perpetuate it, but he accelerated the conditions of the problem. Yeah. And there's no like, it doesn't seem like there's no disruption of trust for her. Like, she's just like, yes, this man will save us. That is again kind of this stereotypical, very flat. There's not a lot of dimensionality. Yeah, it's all in service of Walt.
Yes, how much of it is the movie is meant to absolve like white people of what they see as their minor transgressions of like racism. Like, I mean, that is the thesis of the movie, is like, well, I'm not racist because a real racist would do this. I say slurs, but right.
Like, deep down at my core, if push came to shove, I mean, I would do the right thing, including sacrificing myself.
Yeah, and this is not a new thing. Like, obviously, Green Book just won the Oscar a couple years ago, and that was kind of almost the exact same thing. The idea of like a story about racism, but told through the eyes of like a white person who's like, I'm not that bad or whatever. Like, I can be absolved of this level of racism because of X, Y, and Z or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that this movie, from Clint Eastwood's perspective, I wouldn't even say that it's predominantly about racism, right? Because it's much more about like family and community, and then also masculinity.
Oh, big time masculinity. And that is so much of this movie is like a version of like every time somebody says like, well, it's not the same as it was back then, like this is that the version of masculinity from back then is like what this character is. And there's no like commentary on that at all. It's just like this, what's the problem? This is what a man is. I don't understand. And that's really annoying.
Right. It's other people who are faltering, like other people's masculinity who is faltering.
The problem's not me. I think it's everyone else. That's a Tim Pool deep cut. If you've never seen the video, Tim Pool has a video where he's complaining, I shit you not, about why he is not married with kids. And he says, with zero irony, the problem's not me. I think it's everyone else. It's one of the most beautiful clips that this great wide world of ours has to offer. We love them.
Wow. I'm flummoxed.
You gotta watch it. It's really funny.
That's
not a whole episode where it's Tim Pool talking about modern dating. So have fun. But yeah, he literally says
the opposite of an aphrodisiac.
Oh no, Tim Pool's not a hey girl, you want to take this beanie off later or what?
God, my like nightmare fuel is just like a YouTube playlist of Tim Pool intercut with Clint Eastwood growling.
Put on the lacy beanie. It's gonna be a nice night. All right, this is gonna hurt my throat.
So you want to talk about the ending of this film, how they resolve
so
the conflict between so as we kind of alluded to, basically Clint tries to intercede to make it such that Tao does not have to remain connected to his cousin or be like under the obligation of this threat, and kind of trains him in masculinity, gets him a job, and then the cousin and the gang beat up Tao and burn a cigarette on his face and steal a bunch of his tools and break his construction materials. And then Walt finds one of the gang members and physically threatens him, beats him up, like pistol whips him. And then subsequently the gang like kidnaps, assaults, and rapes Sue, the sister. And then there is the build up to the final confrontation. Yeah. What's he going to do? Is Walt going to, go annihilate all of these men? Is he going to complete the training of Tao and they're going to go thrash these men together?
Cool.
I know.
Nothing happened. Almost spilled wine again. It was an empty bottle though, but I didn't want to crash. I gotta stop fidgeting. I'm sorry. Clint
Eastwood's racism is the number one enemy of this episode of the pod, and number the second one is that particular bottle of wine.
That I keep almost spilling.
But so there's many roads, many options in front of Walt that involve vengeance. And what does he choose, Craig? What road does he go down?
So there's a running motif in the story of that he does this kind of intimidating old guy thing where he keeps he's gonna get in a conflict with somebody and he slowly reaches into his coat like he's going for a weapon, but he pulls out his little finger guns. Which the first time he did that, I was like, all right, that was cool. I don't remember who he did it to the first time.
I think it is a pretty smooth move.
It is a badass move, except they do it 17,000 times.
Yeah, when he follows them down the road he shoots all of them with his finger guns. Yeah,
and he makes little sound effects. I like that. But so that's ultimately what he chooses to do. Basically, he goes to the house where the cousin and the gang are, basically draws them outside, makes sure that there's a lot of witnesses, and basically makes them draw down on him. It's an old Western standoff where he does the little finger gun thing, but when he reaches into his pocket, they all fire on him and he dies. Essentially creates a big enough stink that they get arrested because they shot an old man in the open, and basically he solves the problem for Tao by sacrificing himself. And I fucking hate that. I hate that. I don't like that. You're not a goddamn martyr. I think that's probably. It's just so self-appeasing to be I did it. I'm the hero. I hate the whole. I don't know. I think it's just I don't like that guy. That type of guy. I just know that guy. I know that guy. And you're not a martyr. You're not a savior. I don't know. I was just so annoyed that he gets this moment of glory. I don't know. I was just really annoyed.
That's fair. I will say there's a much cooler version of this movie that goes totally exploitation.
Yeah, that would be
and
dope.
The two of them, being Walt and Tao, just go and rip up this house, and maybe even they both die.
Yeah, back-to-back guns.
Yes,
shooting.
just blazing, and they whip up in the Gran Torino. Maybe the Gran Torino blows up.
Awesome.
There's a version of that movie that is not directed by Clint Eastwood, but is largely the same, but ends in this bombastic moment that I would have liked, in the sense that I enjoyed watching it. Though I will say, I disagree that the ending of this movie is stupid. I think it's the only possible ending for this movie, while staying within the boundaries of Eastwood's political project. I don't think it's good, because I don't think the movie is good.
Yeah.
But it satisfies Walt's arc, while never sacrificing his role as father protector that he has occupied. It's kind of pre-transformation in the movie. We see him as disengaged, alienated, and alone. And when it begins to emerge that he is or could be embedded in interdependent relationships, the only way he can acknowledge this status is to think of himself as a martyr. This is still a relation defined in reference to another person, right? But it's ultimately about his agency, Walt's power over, his ability to predict and then dictate outcomes. And he literally is posed like fucking Jesus.
Yeah, he is.
When he falls, because he falls with his arms out and, you know, kind of the head back. Yes, exactly. Like he's, it's just missing the actual crucifix. And
he denied Peter 3 times before the cock crowed, though. That did happen in the movie. That's a Bible thing, right?
Yes.
You'll deny me? Oh my God. I was on such a roller coaster there for a second.
Peter denies him 3 times.
But does he say that on the cross? He says it around that time, right?
He says it before that.
At the dinner.
Yes.
At that dinner they had.
Which I believe was called The Last Supper.
It was the last one. It was the last one they had.
It was the final dinner. So I don't like this movie. It's not pleasant to watch. It's not particularly engaging or entertaining. But I think that this ending makes sense for what Clint is depicting, which is the man that you've described seeing to fruition his ideal vision of who he is.
Yeah.
Now again, like, I don't like that, but I think it is more authentic to that internal universe than like if he had gone and shot up those guys.
Yeah.
Because I think the whole thing here is like there's some idea here that Clint is trying to represent about like restoration of family.
Yeah. He also like tries to shoehorn in at the end that like he doesn't want to kill them because he's like, I've killed a man before and it's the worst. I feel like that little monologue was probably like they're like, why doesn't he just kill them? And they're like, well, somebody is gonna ask that, so put a little thing in there about, I don't like killing a man.
His guilt around his
call
participation
him a slur 17 times.
Right. His guilt around his participation in Korea is one of the most interesting and least explored parts of the movie.
Right, yeah, really, because that scene is pretty good. When he shows Tao the rifle and the like stuff in the chest
and the silver,
the
silver
metal,
star metal, but then like that's not part of his confession.
Mm-mm.
Which is very much set up as like that's what he is going to confess.
Yeah.
And the reason why he doesn't, in terms of movie construction, is so that the ending is not spoiled by that action.
Yeah.
Right? Because if he went and he said, I feel so guilty about killing 13 men that I know of in Korea, then we know that he's not going to kill those men.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's basically like the writers created 2 threads that were in opposition to each other. And instead of just like dropping one of them or being willing to like dig in deeper to the emotional motivation, they're like, we're going to kind of make this play off as a joke.
Yeah.
He kissed one woman who wasn't his wife 40 years ago.
Yeah. His confession was like the equivalent of like in a job interview, be like, my weaknesses are actually my strengths. Were kind of was like what
my weaknesses is that I work too hard.
Yeah, that was kind of like the equivalent of his confession was like, yeah, I was too handsome once and I got a little peck on the cheek or whatever.
I have a hard time doing group work because I take it all on my back.
Fuck yeah. That's what a man does. According to this movie. Right. And then we get the little epilogue scene, which I also did not like, which is the will reading. And I mostly don't like it because like he still calls him Toad in the thing. And I was like, man, you can't even, like, now, like, at least call him by his real name. Does he ever call him by his real name? I don't remember.
Yes, I think so. I think there's some scenes later
I think maybe when he shows him the rifle or he's talking about having killed people in Korea.
Yeah, and I feel like when he references, like, needing his help.
Yeah.
He refers to him as Tao, I think.
I'll debase myself and call you a non-slur. We didn't cover that, but he calls this young boy who like he takes under his wing is named
like
Tao.
16, 17 would be my estimation.
Yeah, his name is Tao, and Clint Eastwood's character just calls him Toad the whole movie. Because it's funny, because it sounds like his name, but it's not. So, that's funny.
So
hey, he's 97 years old. He's trying to find...
It's wild how old he looks in this movie. And then...
Watching the mule?
Yes, yeah. And then watching...
Where he looks like the fucking shrunken head from Beetlejuice in the mule. He's like looking fucked up.
You are still alive.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You are still helming movies. It's bonkers. Also, like, directing yourself in a movie is...
weird.
I feel like there are maybe two possibilities there, or is possible under two conditions. One, you have to be like such an auteur, such a like artistically specific genius, and like your creativity is so all consuming that you just like know exactly what you want, and like only you can accomplish. I'm not touching that, okay?
I like Tyler Perry. I don't necessarily like
you know what I didn't like Tyler Perry as Colin Powell in Vice. We didn't even talk about that in that episode.
You want me to invade Iraq? Okay, I guess. And then
Christ.
I'll be in a scene later, and then I'm gone.
For 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Or you can be so... cookie cutter, cut and dry, very like few flourishes, and you're like, I'm gonna set the camera here, I'm gonna look at the light, my DP, like my director of photography, is gonna come up and be like, yep, the light's fine, and I'm gonna go stand in front of it, and we're gonna go next.
We're gonna do this once. Yeah.
And I think we know what camp Eastwood falls in.
Yep, for sure.
So
it's crazy. Like, speaking about like how old he looks in this, and like I was going back just like through his IMDb page, and I like Unforgiven. I think we talked about it briefly on that. But the plot of Unforgiven is that like Clint Eastwood's character is old as shit and is like time to retire, and that was made 20 years before this one. And like in Unforgiven, I was like, looking tight, Clint. You're looking good, buddy.
It's wild.
And he's supposed to be old as hell. Yeah, I know. It's so crazy.
So
yes.
What about this car? You want to revisit the discussion of the car?
I just the Gran Torino as the like central metaphor of this story. I don't know. I just don't think it like works because they don't really share that thing other than like Tao tried to steal it. But like I don't know. There needs to be like more scenes of them. I don't know. Where's the scene of like them test driving it together or something, like him teaching him how to like Tokyo drift in the Gran Torino or whatever.
Again, Tokyo drifting into the front yard of the gang's house.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So like I said at the beginning, I don't think it's a problem that the metaphor is not particularly deep. I think this is a movie that overwhelmingly is oriented towards like, I kind of hate this phrase, but middle America, right? People just like kind of cut down the middle. Like not everything has to be like 17 layers of interpretation. I do think the fact that it is not present in, it's kind of like you said, there's like this moment at the, the confrontation at the beginning. They like very briefly, sometimes it's like in the back behind them, it's like in the background of shots. And then they, it shows up again at the end. It just makes it feel like the movie shouldn't be called this for how little, like it is the animating thrust of the movie. Like it's why the action of the movie happens.
It's a goddamn title.
But otherwise it's not terribly present. And Gran Torino as a phrase doesn't have like this independent meaning that is like relevant to what's going on. Also, I'll say like I forgot. Like we'll talk about this in a second, but I've seen this movie one time before. That was in theaters. So I was essentially watching it with new eyes. Yeah. Not totally, but like fundamentally kind of watching it with new eyes. I did not remember very much of it. And I totally forgot in like the back half of the movie that the car is like even relevant,
right?
Because it's simply not.
Yeah, we don't see him, like, he tells us he loves the car, but we don't see any, like, I don't know, there's not a scene where
we don't see him driving it,
right? Ever.
Yeah,
there should be like a scene like in Titan.
Like, what's the
Titan? I would watch that.
You watch Clint Eastwood grinding on a car?
Yeah, hell yeah. Well,
you know
we are gonna get.
You know what I want to see is
so.
Clint Eastwood doing that dance on top of the car that she does in sure, from the beginning of Titan, but I meant the dance that she does on top of the fire truck in the dance scene where like all the firemen are dancing and they all look up at her and she's like slowly grinding.
I don't remember if we talked about it on the last episode. I think we did briefly, but I watched that recently and it was dope.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I love that movie, but I love fucked up body horror stuff, and Julia Ducournau or Ducournau maybe that sounds a little more French. I'm really excited by her work, and I can't wait to see what she does next. I feel like she's on like a for me, because like Raw was good, like solidly good. I really liked it, and then Titan was like next level. Also, I will not name the person because it's not I don't want to like embarrass them or something, but I had one of the coolest experiences in a movie theater that I've ever had when I saw Titan. Yeah. In that one of my friends straight up fucking passed out during because of a scene in that movie. Yeah. And they are okay, they're fine. But like, you know, growing up, you'd read about, I think we've talked about this, maybe off the pod, of like, you'd read about like when Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk was released, of like people vomiting or fainting when he reads the story, the short story about the guy getting his intestines sucked out by a pool vent, kind of like what happens in Final Destination.
Hell yeah.
5,
I think so, yeah.
And you know, it's just one of those moments where it's like, damn, this movie or whatever, this piece of media was like so impactful. It like just fucking forcibly penetrated your brain and fucked you up. And so watching that happen, of course, my first 10 thoughts are like, are you okay? And then the 11th thought was like, wow, that's kind of rad. After I knew they were okay. I just want to clear, the 11th thought did not arise until I knew they were okay.
Years after it happened, so I was like, that is rad all the way, because I knew they were still alive.
Yes, they're totally fine. But, you know, so Titan is a movie that actually I have personally witnessed, because you always hear about like at Cannes or whatever, and it's like, did that happen? You know? Did someone experience that? But I know it can happen.
What was the one recently where it was like everyone was passing out at Cannes or whatever? There was one recently that...
I don't know if it was Cam, but definitely some of the reporting around Infinity Pool was that people were like throwing up or that it was, you know, eliciting bodily reactions. Did you see that?
I did, yeah. I liked it.
Yeah, I loved it. Hell yeah, Brandon Cronenberg.
Maybe it was Terrifier 2. Did that play at Cannes?
Maybe in a tent by a dumpster outside of.
Hell yeah, I love the Terrifier movies. They're so gross.
So how about speaking of watching movies in illustrious settings?
Yes.
Did you see this movie when it came out?
I did, and I had a weird journey with this movie because I really liked it when it first came out. I probably hadn't seen it since then, or if I had, it was only in pieces, like whenever it was on catching it somewhere. But I remember like really enjoying it. I was like 19 and like fancied myself a little film boy, so like I was like, oh, legacy actor Clint Eastwood, probably, you know, maybe not as I didn't want to like. Now I'm going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back too hard, but like maybe not as enlightened towards like the experience of other people back then at 19. So I was like, this is a good story about a guy. So yeah, I really had a journey with this one. Like, you know, I've thought about this movie since I saw it the first time and was kind of like, yeah, that movie probably sucks. But I do remember the very first time seeing it back in, when did this movie come out? 08, 09?
Yeah, 08.
Yeah, thinking like, oh, okay, I enjoyed that movie. I liked that movie, and this was I did not like it from the word go this time around. So yeah, I had a journey with it.
Yeah, you really
I've really grown.
You're a flip-flopper is what I'm
I
hearing.
am a goddamn flip-flopper.
The right kind of flip-flopper. Yeah, I definitely saw this in theaters in 2008. I did not look up when it released, so I could have been 16 or 17, probably more likely 17 because my birthday's in March. So unless it came out at a like kind of weird time.
I was oh god, I wanted it to be in March. Or I wanted to be early in the year, so I was 19 and not 20. I think I was 20.
So I was probably like 17. I remember hating it when I saw it. I'll be real with you. What I remember about the movie is like, this is racist. He's saying a lot of racial slurs, and also it's boring. Now, I would say watching it now, obviously, my opinion on it being racist has not shifted. It's simply intensified.
Yeah.
But I don't think the movie is boring. But I don't know. My taste in movies at age 17 was like really odd. Like I was watching very extreme stuff, but there's stuff that I watch now that I definitely wouldn't have been able to handle then. So it's just, I don't know, my perspective on things was a lot spottier, but I definitely was like deeply discomfited by how much racism was in it.
Yeah. And I guess I don't know, this feels a little vulnerable to say now, but like I guess back then it didn't strike me as much, the racism being as like blatant and obvious, because I don't know, I guess I bought in more to the like thing that it's pushing, which is the idea that like you're allowed to say and think whatever as long as your actions at the end of the day. And it's like, no, that's still not okay. I don't know, I guess I was more susceptible to the like central message of like, if you've got a good heart, it doesn't matter if you do like a million shitty things in your life, or like you are just an awful person to everyone. I don't know. Yeah, I feel slightly embarrassed.
I don't think
that I even liked it at one point, because I mean, really fucking hated it this time.
I mean, I understand where that impulse is coming from,
yeah.
but I don't think you should be embarrassed. I appreciate you being vulnerable and being honest about it. Like, people are not, for the most part, don't pop out of the womb with perfect opinions. Right. And
except for me.
Yes, of course.
Except for that one time in Gran Torino.
Except for this
one
movie.
time in 08. But, actually, I looked it up while you were talking. Wide release was 09, so I was firmly 20, almost 21.
Oh, wow. Okay, when in 09?
January 9th, 2009.
Okay.
But it was, I think it was an 08 movie, so it probably got released in like late.
I would have been 17 then.
Yeah. 20.
But I think especially, I will say especially as white people, but not exclusively as white people, we are not perfect, obviously, and the privilege that comes with navigating the world as a white person in America especially is something that you grapple with and shifts over time, and like you mentioned throughout this episode, you've had a lot of contact with men who I presume are predominantly or exclusively white, who have endorsed this perspective, both passively and actively, like throughout your childhood. And so I think it's good to be able to see a movie or any form of piece of media again and reflect and say, oh no, like now the cracks are visible.
I do enjoy that like moment, that like revelatory moment of revisiting stuff like this and realizing like, oh no, I've like grown and changed or whatever. And well, it does feel like slightly embarrassing to like look back on things that like I thought or did back then, but it is nice also. I did, at the end of the day, I had fun watching this movie just for the very like idea of like kind of juxtaposing it with how I viewed it,
being able to see the
15 years ago
see
when it
the
came
shift.
Out.
It's also, I mean, you've talked about on the pod before, I mean, you and I were both raised in like Southern conservative churches, but our trajectory out of them were not aligned. Like, I stopped going to church around age 16, 17, and a lot of that was propelled by like my engagement with feminist thought and kind of anarchist thought, and especially like anarchist music through folk punk, which is embarrassing in a very different way. It's a little embarrassing in a different way, but those are ideas that frankly like are very much around the time that I would have seen this movie were actively coursing through me and my social circle, and that I was being exposed to, and my perspective was being cracked open. Whereas for you, I know that was like a slightly later experience.
It started around 16, but it wasn't as stark of a shift. My shift away from like fundamentalism was slower and more gradual, I guess. Yeah. I don't know necessarily fundamentalism. I was never like, I went to a fundamentalist church, but I was never fully on board with the real wacko stuff.
Right, but like if you're swimming in the environment, like you suck that water into your lungs.
Oh, I still like have like times where like I'll have, whatever X, Y, or Z new experience that might have been something that was like verboten by the church, and then just been like, oh wow, I still got that still rattling, that like guilt
like
is still
the
rattling
shame and
around
guilt
in there.
is still embedded. Yeah. I feel that. So I don't think there's anything shameful in admitting that you interpreted this movie in a different way in the past, but it's good to be able to look at this movie and one, see it for the racist piece of shit that it is, but two, also on like a deeper, more interrogating level, see that like it is like the perspective that it's operating from, and that it is exclusionary of the many of the people that it's trying to depict, or that it claims that it's trying to capture. So all right, how about speaking of exclusionary shit,
this might be a letdown.
Is there a game to play this week?
There's not. I couldn't. He
really
didn't have like a solid. This is our Armand White game. He didn't have a solid review of this. The closest, I think he did not like it. But the closest I could find was just like a few like side references from other movies that he had reviewed, like just like kind of like he called I'm trying to pull it up right now. He called, so our next episode is going to be The Mule, and the closest
2 episodes from now, the next episode we're recording.
I'm sorry, 2 episodes from now is going to be The Mule, and the closest I could find was in his review of The Mule. Basically, he says that like it is Gran Torino perfected. So like, so spoiler alert for our segment and The Mule. But yeah, he didn't seem to really like Gran Torino, but he liked The Mule a lot. Which my guess would be like The Mule doesn't as explicitly tackle like racism, and because this one is like, I guess the message at the end of the day in Gran Torino is like, don't be racist. And Armand White's probably like, well, hold on now. No, hold on. Let's not rush into judgment too quick.
I will say, as a spoiler alert for our conversation in like probably 15 minutes, and our conversation that y'all will hear in 2.5 weeks, is that I do think The Mule is a better movie, like a piece of cinema. I'm not saying it's cinema, but it is a better piece of cinema than this
it's more fun,
hunk of
sure,
old shit.
Like, there's more shit where I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah. Same. So okay, let's you wanna call it here?
Yeah, this was a Gran Torino of an episode.
It's a grand.
That's the other reason I don't like this movie, is because I always want to put a goddamn D at the end of that, and I sound like a moron. This is a Grand Torino.
So here's to learning, growing, evolving, and not using. Oh, wait! Before I continue on this moment of pontification, I have to say something I forgot to write in my notes, but just occurred to me right now. There was one time in this movie where I had to look up a word on Urban Dictionary.
Oh, now I want to try to figure out, was it a slur?
It was, but it was oriented towards white people.
Oh. Did he call his son this? Was this the Scott scene?
No, I think it was in one of the scenes with John Carroll Lynch. I think he says it in that period of. It was Ofe.
What?
Which is just like a derogatory term for a white person.
Ofe, like OFAY.
Okay. I could not find an etymological like root. It sounds like there's a lot of different ideas about where it comes from. But so brief detour, but to conclude, to growth, to evolution, to learning, to not having to Google white ethnic racial slurs on Urban Dictionary.
I agree. And Hal, I want to tell you that I think you're a real au-fait.
I like that you use it as an adjective and not a noun.
You're a real au-fait.
There we go.
You're being a little au-fait-ish.
I think you're being a little oafish.
That is just me in a permanent state of oafishness. All right, well, this was fun. And anything you want to add?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Adios.
Kill the boy.